Hi, I'm Jennifer Gunn. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and I'm also a faculty member in History of Science, Technology, and Medicine. And thank you all so much for coming today. It's nice to see familiar faces. And I also want to say thank you to CLA for co-sponsoring this info session, and we'll get started. So last week, I think it was only last week, we learned that the Mellon Foundation has created a new grant program and put out a call for concepts. And you might notice the Mellon Foundation has a new little logo, and they've just rebranded themselves this week with this new logo and an affirmation of what they stand for, what work they support, and what they seek to achieve, which is justice in the arts, culture, and humanities today, and justice in our collective future. And I wanted to highlight that up front because the call for concepts is very much in the vein of supporting those core missions and correlated to those core missions. So we're offering this info session to help people learn about the program and to begin to imagine projects that might fit this call, because while the front end of the call is relatively low stakes, the university it's on a tight timeline, and the university can only submit 3 applications. And so we will, the order of the events today is that I'll just do a very, very basic description of the call and its 3 themes. I'll turn it over to Juliet Burba, the IAS grants developer, to walk you through the internal selection, Mellon's process, and the university's internal selection process. Then I hope we'll have time for Q&As and introductions. And if you be willing during the slide deck presentation, kind of to introduce yourself in chat and say a little bit about your idea or interests, that would also be great. So I'll start by saying that the Call for Concepts grant is open to all accredited nonprofit 4-year degree granting institutions in the US that offer liberal arts education. So we know that the Twin Cities meets this eligibility requirement, and we believe that most of our system campuses do as well. What we will say is that the call came out in a very unconventional way. I think Mindy Breva saw it on LinkedIn. I saw it on Twitter. We weren't formally, we didn't get a formal email about it. And Mellon is going to devote $10 million to this program. So that probably means somewhere between 20 and 30 grants. And they are encouraging, in particular, participation from institutions who have not previously been funded or are minority serving institutions. So the call for concepts, the application is set up as essentially initially 1,000-word concept and very drafty budget, and from which then Mellon will select people or projects to develop for a full grant proposal. As you can see from this slide, they are interested in supporting inquiry into issues of vital social and cultural and historical impact in these 3 thematic areas. And there is a guideline document, a 9-page guideline document for this grant that has much more detail about what these 3 areas are, but I will just try to summarize them quickly, which is to say civic engagement and voting rights. So they're interested in the questions of differential access to the ballot box throughout the nation's history, which obviously continue to be contested, and that has only intensified in the last decade. They understand both current and historical challenges to the realization of an equitable society through voting access, and they're inviting ideas for scholarly and/or curricular projects that illuminate the significance of voting right controversies in any period of US history. And they're interested in all the ways in which the Academy brings its lenses to focus on these questions and the impacts, things like property requirements, felony disenfranchisement, election interference, etc. But they are particularly welcoming those that focus on the role of college and university communities in expanding voter access, whether historically or in the contemporary moment. So that's civic engagement and voting rights. There's a longer description, and we'll put the link to the guideline document into the chat. The next one is race and racialization in the US. And Mellon has recently said, we are an institution that is committed to racial and social justice. And they are very focused on the fact that race continues to be a primary fault line in US society and demands analyses along multiple axes. And so in keeping with the Foundation's mission of building just communities empowered by critical thinking, they want to promote rigorous humanities scholarship and pedagogy on past and present effects of racial differentiation across the entire spectrum of national life. And they're looking for fresh perspectives that can expand and deepen the national conversation. They're welcoming ideas for collective research, curricular innovation, and program development focused on any aspect of race and racialization in US culture and society, but they're particularly interested in projects that would investigate the relationships and tensions between the social structural constitution of race on the one hand and the subjective experiences of race on the other. So the third area is social justice and the literary imagination. And for those of you who don't know, the president of the Mellon Foundation, Elizabeth Alexander, is a poet. She read a poem at Obama's inauguration. And so they are looking for social justice and the literary imagination. They're looking for concepts dedicated to the role of the literary imagination in making and remaking worlds and societies in the past and the present. It is a firmly rooted belief in the power of literature. And they're also interested in speculative literature that could be proposing social thought experiments and dreamed up inventions in science fiction, fantasy, and other genres that invite readers to encounter the world with fresh eyes and dare the next generation to build different systems. So so in this category, they're thinking about things that might outline curricular developments, new scholarship, community engagement, writer convenings, and other efforts that highlight and advance the role of literature, from canonical works to less studied popular writing, in truth-telling and social change. So the role of literature in truth-telling and social change. So these are the three categorical areas. And please note that these are very humanities oriented. And there is, while Mellon often lumps humanities and the arts more generally together, they're drawing, as well as the interpretive social sciences, oops, sorry, motion detector light just went off. They're drawing some boundaries around sort of the fields that they see most related to these calls. And Juliet Burba, the IAS grants developer, will talk more about concrete things that they're asking for, like who can be a PI and details of the Mellon and our internal U of M grants process. And I'll turn it over to Juliet now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. You can see here on this slide that the PI for this call has to be a tenure or tenure track faculty member, or it can be a dean. And the PI has to come from a humanities or humanistic social sciences department. This is, they also do allow people from other fields, but it has to be somebody whose work is incorporating humanities-based perspectives or methodologies. They have a list. So in the guidelines that I think the link is in the chat, there's a large list of fields that people can come from, PIs can come from. It's not exhaustive, but I think it gives you a good sense. And if you have any questions about it, we can contact the foundation, and we, Jennifer and I might also have some insight into that. So as you can see here, PIs from medical schools, engineering schools, business schools, arts, music, design schools, law schools, seminaries, those sorts of things, they're not eligible. And this is referring both to our colleges, but their guidelines are also referring to schools, institutions when they note these. Let's go to the next slide.
Juliet, can I just say one thing?
Yep.
So however, things like architecture through its historical and theoretical perspectives is included. So the fact that in our institution, it's in a design school should not be considered ruling it out. And same with musicology and things like that. So just ask.
We've taken this language from their guidelines, and so in some cases this is referring to full institutions like an art college. Okay, all right, let's go on to the next slide. So this is outlining the process. So the process is a little confusing. I'll try to outline it as carefully as I can, but please feel free to ask, refer to the IAS webpage, to their documents. Please be sure to check all of these things, because it is confusing. It took us a little while to fully understand what they were asking for and when. So the first part of the process is to register. And you will be registering with the IAS, and you will be registering with the foundation. So there's 2 steps to this registration process. And we have links on the IAS website that will get you to the 2 places that you need to register with. So with the IAS registration, we have April 18th at just before midnight, 11:59 p.m. That is the deadline for registering with the IAS. And with that registration, we are asking for, so we're asking for about a 300-word summary of your idea for a project. So we're asking for the concepts, the activities, the purpose and goals, the potential impacts. So this is a fairly brief description of what you think your project would be. And then there are some other questions there too that are just things like which area, which subject area does it fall into, and a few other questions that we ask. So that you have to get to us by April 18th. Mellon has a deadline slightly later. It is April 20th, but I would just urge you to do it all by April 18th. That's why we didn't even put the April 20th deadline on the slide. The Mellon site doesn't ask you for that 300 words. They just this really is a site for you to register and for them to make sure that you are coming from an institution that is eligible. So on this registration site, this Mellon registration site, they have questions connected to that. They want to know a number of things about the institution, and we have the information that you'll need for that site also available through the IAS website. So that's the registration process. By April 25th, the IAS, it says IAS selects, we'll have a committee of folks from CLA and IAS that will review the concepts that have been proposed and select 3. And the reason we're doing that is because the University of Minnesota can only put forward 3 concepts. Our understanding is that that is specifically the Twin Cities campus, you know, that if you come from one of the other campuses, you can submit through your institution. So there have been times when it has seemed that they've been treating the U of M system as a single institution. In this particular case, as we're understanding this call, if you come from one of the other campuses, you can submit through your campus. And Jennifer, correct me if your understanding of this has changed since we last talked about this. Okay. So we'll pick 3 that will move forward. Those 3 will be developed into a, oh, thank you. So that was the registration step. So we will pick, let's go forward 1 slide, because now we're moving to the next stage. So of the 3 that are selected to move forward, they will be developed into a 1,000-word application statement. So we're not calling this a proposal because it is not yet the full-blown proposal. It is a 1,000-word application. And this will be submitted through Mellon's Flux portal. And there are a few other things that you'll need to develop: a budget, a statement about the humanities work at the University of Minnesota, and a diversity statement as well. And so those will get submitted on May 16th. And then from those, over the course of the summer, the Mellon Foundation will be selecting finalists. They will work with finalists to develop these into full proposals. Our understanding is that this selection will be done by mid-September, although we expect that people might get some indication over the course of the summer whether they're finalists. It's all a bit opaque. And then, so these will be developed into full proposals that will go to their board at their December board meeting. And then decisions will be made for projects to start on January 1st, 2023. So we're on the part 2 slide, and I jumped ahead actually to part 3. Could we go forward 1 slide? Oh, no, I guess we don't have a part 3 slide. So again, I'm going to reiterate. Part 1, which is due April 18th, that is the registration phase. That is when something will be due both to the foundation and to the IAS. And that is when a 300 words summary, essentially, of your project or overview is due to us. We will select from that 3 to move forward. We will notify you by April 25th. From that, the finalists, or excuse me, I'm not going to use that language. We've been working hard to clarify our language so as not to make the process more confusing. From that, the people that are selected to move forward will develop 1,000-word versions of their idea. That will get submitted to the Mellon Foundation. And then from there, the foundation will work with finalists to develop full proposals. So that is their process. And yes, you can see on this slide, we've got a link to the IAS page. I think there's, I think the information there can help clarify if any of this is confusing. It will also link you to the places that you need to go to register. and the information that you need to do that. So yeah, questions. Please let me know if that made sense.
And there are 23 of us on this call. So Juliet, if you want to stop sharing.
Yeah, yeah. Abby, could you? Thank you. And
Okay.
then we can see everybody there. Excellent.
So feel free to either raise hands or just unmute yourself and ask any questions you have. We're in the same boat you are. We're just trying to parse Mellon's language. They will not take phone calls about this. They are only dealing with email to ask questions. But I'm sure you all will be raising questions we don't know the answers to, and we will follow up with Mellon to get those answers. So.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate for that first phase to get registered with Mellon, because if you have an idea that you want to propose for this and you don't get registered, then you're out of the running. So just, you know, even if you think you might have an idea, I would suggest getting registered, making sure you're registered, and that will give you access then to their system to submit an application should your idea be selected to move forward.
And we really are trying to make this as easy as possible. That registration, as Juliet noted, is really for Mellon to weed out who might be coming from an institution that doesn't meet their basic requirements. And so we actually, when you register with the IAS, we actually will have a downloadable PDF of all the quirky, specific demographic information and things that the Mellon registration form will ask of you. So we're trying to make it as easy for people to register as possible.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Thanks, Juliet, for this very wonderful introduction. This is a great opportunity, and I wonder, okay, so I have several questions, but one question is the investigator team limited only to people at the University of Minnesota, or can we include folks from other institutions? But yeah, the PI has to be at the U of M, right?
Well, the PI for if there's a PI at an institution that falls under the eligibility requirements, then they could be the PI and they could submit through their institution.
Okay, okay, thank you. Thank you.
And yes, you can have co-organizers from other institutions. That's my understanding. And I think that you can have co-organizers from other institutions.
And second question, out of the many, is there like a template that what are the types of, because I understand about the description, 300 words, 1000 words, is there a place where we can find the types of activities that specifically Mellon expects or requires as part of this project?
Yes, so they have a document, and we link to that. Is it the link may even be in our, okay, so if you look at the chat, a few comments up.
I can see it. This is the Mellon Foundation Higher Learning Call for Concepts Guidelines.
Right.
Yeah.
That's super. Yep. Okay, great.
So that gives you all of that detail, including what Mellon will pay for. That's something that I did not review. But Mellon, there are some typical things that Mellon will pay for and won't pay for. One of the things that I think is important to note, because this has come up repeatedly, and that is that they won't pay for K through 12 education. And so sometimes there are projects that people are doing with K through 12 schools, and they won't pay for that. They say that they won't pay for tuition, but tuition at the University of Minnesota is paid as a part of fringe benefits. So fellow, pre-doctoral fellows, et cetera, can get tuition paid for,
For graduate students.
or graduate students. Yeah.
Graduate students.
So a
right.
fellow or higher.
Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah. Graduate students, and undergraduates, I believe, cannot. Is that, yeah, their tuition, yeah. So undergrads cannot, graduate students. So if you have RAs built into a project, they seem to be interested in paying for, let me look back. I think for, let's see. So course releases they'll pay for, course development funds they'll pay for. And this one I found interesting, funds for the implementation of experimental projects. So what that means exactly, I don't know, but I thought that was an interesting bullet point. They will pay for postdoctoral fellowships. And then some other typical things, workshop expenses, they'll pay for childcare, which I think is great. And then they will pay up to 10% of funds for operational, administrative, and occupancy costs, but they do not pay indirects. So that's kind of their way of making up for that.
I have a question about Mellon in general, or how they think about the humanistic social sciences. Is that, like, I'm in a geography department. I know geography counts as a humanistic social science in some guises, but then I'm wondering about like how, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about like how social sciencey is this approach to inquiry, and where is it on some kind of spectrum. So I'm wondering if they think through that question beyond like the category, like is it just sort of like, oh, this is a person in geography, that's fine, this is an interesting project. I'm not going to be doing like, experiments or anything like that. So, but I don't have a sense of like where on the kind of spectrum it tips over into humanistic social science and when it's too social sciencey. That might be my own ignorance, but.
So well, just to start with, on their list in this guidelines document, in their list of eligible fields, they do have geography excluding physical geography listed. So they do include at least part of geography. And so I think, based on that alone, you wouldn't, what you're doing wouldn't be automatically excluded. But then I think it is how well it fits what they're trying to achieve through this call.
And I would just say, Kate, that, did we lose Kate? Oh no, there you are. My screen moved around. I would just say that the other word Mellon's been using recently is interpretive social sciences. The phrase they've been using is interpretive social sciences. But I think if you really read the detail in how they're describing these three categories, concern about community is a very core element, and thinking about about society more in terms of being a community, and both in past and present and future sorts of ways. So I don't think, for example, that that geography using tools like GIS would be out of line. It really depends on what your core questions are, I think, more than anything else. And that's not really helpful, but. Other thoughts or questions? Oh yeah, Anne. Oh, was that your hand up? No, sorry.
What is, if I may, I have already asked, Alexandra, go first.
Well, mine's just a sort of basic administrative question. You say that they will pay 10% administrative costs, but not indirect costs. Can you then add 10% at the top of the, say the budget is for 100,000, can you just add 10%? No, they have to be identified administrative costs.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And
yeah, sorry.
Eric. No, go ahead.
So 2 questions. One, what is the optimal team of scholars besides principal investigator for, like, we have several ideas for projects around climate literacy, developing climate literacy, especially scholarship around climate literacy, which does not exist. It's non-existing, as if we didn't care what's happening to the planet. So we could possibly propose a team that has several scholars from both from the EU and outside institutions, but we could do a smaller team of, let's say, 3-4 scholars, and then of course graduate students or staff or something. Is there a preference? Like, would one type of approach involving more scholars, more institutions, would this be more feasible or desirable from the Mellon's perspective than a more narrower approach with a smaller team, more focused projects? What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to answer, and then I'll let Juliet answer, because I think it pays to have 2 people or more thinking about this. Most of the recent Mellon grants have asked that they be collaborative and often multi-institutional and often community engaged. I think that Mellon would be happy with all of those 3 elements being in one of these grant proposals, but they don't explicitly ask for it in this grant. And so I think that, I think it's more a question of what do you think you need to do the work? I think that's actually probably the critical element here. And who do you think should be in your team? I definitely think that they're open to non-academic partners, community partners who are non-academic, and it is the Mellon conventional model that has a single PI who is a tenure track faculty member, but you can have co-organizers, and there's the ability to flesh that out. And also they typically ask for, on a full proposal, they typically ask for a list of participants. So they aren't necessarily people who are co-PIs, but that you envision or have gotten commitments from as participants. And Juliet, correct me, but aren't we asking also for a list of potential participants as part of the step 1 registration, along with the 300 word?
Yes, we are. And I don't know that you have to have, I'm looking back at the guidelines. I don't know that you have to have all of them. I don't know that you have to have all of your co-organizers worked out. I'm sure over the course of the summer, you could develop that further. One thing that I want to note is, so in past proposals, Mellon has always used this language of co-organizers. In this particular set of guidelines, they are referring to co-PIs. And whether that is, whether that's deliberate, whether that's just that somebody happened to use that language is impossible to know. Their materials are not always completely clear. And there have been times when we've had to ask for clarification, or they've used one term. And so, use one term when they meant something slightly different, or so it may be that in the end it shows up again as co-organizers rather than co-PIs. And I'm looking to somewhere I saw something, and now I'm not seeing it, but I'm sure if I look at these materials long enough, I will. And that was a reference to co-PIs potentially coming from other institutions or organizations. And so I'd want to look look into that more deeply to make sure I'm not misremembering, but I believe that co-PIs don't have to come, they certainly don't all have to come from within the University of Minnesota. And I believe that they can come from non-academic institutions or organizations.
Can I add one other thing? Merrick, your topic sounds really cool and incredibly important, but remember, it's going to have to fit into one of their buckets: civic engagement and voting rights, race and racialization in the United States, and social justice and a literary imagination.
That's the one, social justice and
Yeah.
literary imagination. That's like 100% within what we're doing. And this
And
concept of climate justice is just exploding now. The notion that future can be compromised in the present, and that these climate issues are central to these considerations going forward. Thank you.
Excellent. I mean, I figured as much, but
And how about summer salaries or stipends? Because course buyouts is one thing, and would the Mellon, is there a possibility of summer funding?
Let me look. They don't specifically mention it.
It's a curious phrasing here. They say alternatively, faculty stipends or salary supplements, and summer salary is usually a supplement, right?
Yeah.
Will be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just say one other thing. This is part of Mellon's new direction and has been in place for about a year and a half now, but is explicitly commented in here, which is that Mellon for the next, I think they made the commitment for 5 years, but don't hold me to that. It could be in my imagination. They basically have pulled back from the international and are focusing on the US domestic. And so under disallowed expenditures is projects with a primarily international focus. Any international aspect of the proposed intellectual work must be pursued in a comparative fashion alongside US-oriented content. And I just wanted to, I mean, that is a major deviation from Mellon's historical orientation. And it's certainly one that they've gotten a lot of pushback on, I know, but that is, and weirdly, within their description of the 3 categories, they actually do sort of mention beyond the US, but the core must be US focused.
Sure. Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions? Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hi. I wondered if you could say just a few words about our previous interactions or collaborations with Mellon. I know that there was some language about, well, if you've worked with Mellon before, you know, this may be a, you know, not another go round, but I wonder if you could just say a few words about that.
Sure. So Mellon is explicitly encouraging, and I think this is partly reflected in the curious way in which they chose to issue this call on social media. They're explicitly looking for encouraging applications from institutions that haven't had Mellon funding in the last 5 years and or are minority serving institutions. So on the one hand, they say they're encouraging that, and we'd have to say we have been generously funded by Mellon in many respects. So we currently have a continuing a grant from Mellon for the Heritage Studies and Public History program. The University of Minnesota Press has a grant from Mellon for Manifold. We have a grant from the Mapping Prejudice Project in the university libraries, has a grant, newly awarded Mellon grant. The IAS has a grant from Mellon for the Environmental Stewardship, Place and Community Initiative. And the Minnesota Transform Project has one of Mellon's Just Futures grants. And I think there are a couple of other smaller Mellon grants that I'm totally blanking on. So the bottom line is the University of Minnesota has been well funded by Mellon, and I would not expect us to be at the top of Mellon's priority list for this grant program if they are really trying to expand the pool of institutions to which they offer the grant. On the other hand, it is the classic case of you never get what you don't apply for. And I have to say, every time they have a grant call and then I look at who and what gets funded, I'm often surprised. So I would just, I think it's definitely worth us submitting 3 applications and going through that 1,000-word and draft budget stage, and then they will make the decision. And I will also say that if we are lucky enough to have any of our proposals selected, we were a little perturbed when we noticed that they might not notify people until September 22nd. Or mid-September of 2022. I think that's, and the reason I say that is because many of you were also involved in Just Futures proposals, and you know that those were kind of killers to pull together in a very short period of time. These are smaller amounts, but sometimes having a smaller amount doesn't make it a whole lot easier. So I would just say, put that in your thinking that that it is possible that you would be called upon to put together a full proposal in September and October, or September, October, by early November at the very latest.
Yeah, I would say about that process though, that with Just Futures, it was a bit of a free-for-all. There were a lot of proposals going in, a lot more proposals going in than were going to be awarded. In this particular case, with Mellon having gone through all of these applications to then select ones to move forward with, the likelihood of funding is much, much, much higher. How much higher, I don't know, but I know that they don't want to spend a lot of their time working with ideas that they don't see as viable proposals going forward to their board.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. And I think that the way that they've constructed this process, I think there are 2 reasons, just guessing what's behind their thinking. And one is to save people from the kind of effort that went into these the proposals for Just Futures with that really short turnaround. And then also to really open it up to more institutions that probably just can't put that kind of time into a full proposal when the likelihood of getting funded isn't there.
And the other thing to say is that this proposal can be for $250,000 to $500,000, and it can be for a duration of up to 3 years, but it doesn't have to be all 3 years either. But yes, I agree with Juliet. I think once they select proposals to develop, they will probably not select more than, say, 10 or 15% over what they plan on funding.
I have a question again, I'm sorry. So I'm looking at their guidelines and I'm looking at the list of disciplines. So I am a comparative literature scholar specializing in children's and young adult literature, and my primary field in which I have all of my degrees is English and American literature. But I am at the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, which is education. So, and I think I can make easily, based on my publications, my academic record, a case for me as being a scholar in English and comparative literature, but formally, I'm with the Department of Education, and education is not listed here. Curriculum and instruction, this is page 8.
Yep.
of
Right.
eligible humanities and humanistic social sciences fields of study. Do you think this could be a problem?
I think what we'd want to do is contact them in advance to ask. I don't see, assuming the project is humanities based.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't foresee this being a problem, but it's the kind of thing that we'd want to ask about just to make sure, and also just to have it on their radar when that would come in, you know, when they would see that, and then they'd be alerted to your background.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so if you do decide that you want to move forward with that, let's be in touch next week and get an email off to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So if I may, I don't know, I'm like, so the next step would be to send you a draft of this 300-word description. That's the next thing we do, or a registration with Mellon first.
So, well, they can happen concurrently. Technically, the next step is this 300-word description, and you're not emailing it to us. It's going through the InfoReady portal, and that link is on the IAS site. But very shortly after, on the 20th, that registration with Mellon is due. And so that's why we're saying just do them both at the same time. The registration with Mellon, you'll have the information from the IAS website that you'll need to complete that registration, and it really won't take you much time at all. It's probably a 10-minute process.
Super. Okay.
And again, Mellon is asking for various kinds of institutional information that most of us as faculty don't have at our fingertips. So when you register on the IAS InfoReady site, you can download all the information that you'll need to fill in those pieces of the Mellon registration.
Things like the EIN number and just, yeah.
How many, demographics on humanities degrees or weird things like that.
There's just a lot of, yes and no questions, and then some obscure numbers that you don't want to have to look up. One of them took me 10 minutes to find, so I found it. You don't have to. Yay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
And our all of this, all of the information on our website just went up. We're working really quickly to get this together, so it just went up today. So if you see some piece of information that seems like it's missing or something that's confusing, please let us know. I think we caught everything. We tried to be as thorough as possible, but there's a chance we missed something.
And I'd also say, if you have an idea, but you want to talk it through, you're looking for partners, just give us a call, and we're more than happy to try to do that, to help with that.
Well, let's say an email.
Oh, yeah, sorry. We might be more amenable to talking on the phone than Mellon is, but it's easier to reach us first by email.
Other questions? Thoughts? Ideas you want to pitch?
People you want to meet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my head is buzzing with how to articulate some of the things we've been doing, because the work on climate literacy is really in infancy now in the world, in this country also. And but there's just so much that needs to be done. We will have to be very selective in terms of, okay, here is a specific outcome. Here is something we can do in 2 years or maybe in 3 years, and with this budget, with this team, with these specific tasks. So we will be, I will definitely be getting back to you with ideas and drafts and so thank you so much. This has been very informative.
And we're not actually asking you guys for a budget for the first stage. We're really just asking for the idea and sort of to get you focused, thinking on the purpose and goals and activities. but the budget will come towards the end of it. You know, we're not asking people to put together budgets until we know which proposals are moving forward.
Don't use proposals, concepts.
Oh, concept, sorry. Or
Nomenclature.
what, yeah, the concepts that are moving forward to the application.
To the application stage, yeah. And then we will work with you to get those applications for the 3 that are moving forward. We'll work with you to, there's kind of a sketch of a budget that's needed and then a few other things, and we'll work with folks on that.
And it's not April Fool's Day today, right?
No, we wondered that because it was another one of these tight turnaround things. We're like, is Mellon playing a joke on us?
Okay, great.
I was just going to jump in real quick. First, thanks to Jennifer, Juliet, and Susanna for putting all of this together. On the CLA side of it, if people are feeling like they have kind of they're a lone wolf kind of project and they want partners, we know Alexandra Brown, who's on the call here, deals with the humanities and research development at CLA, and she knows a lot of the work that's going on around the college. So if you are looking for partners and feel like you don't want to go it alone, we could kind of tell you who else might be doing work in complementing areas for one of these concepts as well. So, and we're, stand by to help the folks in IAS if too much work is coming your way, for the great job you've done in laying it out here.
And Nick, did you have a question? Oh no, that was a shout out to CLA.
And also
Great.
we're available to help with your concept development as well, if as a backup to Juliet.
Yeah, we're coordinating this process, but it's totally, it's totally a collaborative effort.
And maybe last question on my end. Are we able to pay salary to someone who's not tenured or tenure track faculty, who's contractual faculty? So he's faculty at the U, but not on a regular salary, but an annual contract. Are we able to include this person as a researcher on this request, on this grant?
I don't know the answer to that. I guess if it could be considered course development funds, which is something they specifically call out is allowed, perhaps. I think we'd want to talk.
How about a researcher
who's not an RA, not a graduate student or a faculty member?
So this would be a postdoc, maybe?
They do allow postdocs. There are postdoctoral fellowships are allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, course development funds for the implementation of experimental projects. So, if this person is engaging in that work, you could probably count it that way too.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or?
Well, I will just say, I am thinking, and I was actually hoping to find out a little bit more about what people were thinking in terms of proposals. But I am wondering if there are people here that are interested specifically in the race and racialization in the United States, if we might strategically want to think about a proposal that is more of a CLA proposal, which isn't to say that there couldn't be certain units that we would want to focus on. But one thing as I read the concept language that I find particularly interesting is that there is a real emphasis on sort of social structural, how race is constituted, right? Sort of through the social and the structural, as well as through the subjective. And one thing I've been thinking about in this space is, clearly there's a lot in the curricular space that we're doing. There are also lots of units that are, I think, really rethinking their curriculum around questions of race. But the other piece that I'm interested in is thinking about the college as a social structural institution that constitutes race, as well as the ways in which it gets personally constituted across the faculty and staff and student body. So it strikes me that there could be a very interesting proposal that is sort of connecting institutional change to the different types of sort of pedagogical work that takes place a little bit more discreetly in units. And there's the possibility of a proposal that could sort of think towards not just what this grant could do for us in the short term with a small body of people, but what it could do in terms of really thinking towards institutional change in the longer term, and something that can sort of help us to anticipate how to continue to sustain the work after the period of the grant. So that's, it's not clear to me exactly, entirely what such a concept might look like. But if there are people that would be interested in participating in that type of a concept, definitely, I'd love having a conversation with you. At the same time, if there are, if there are, like 10 and 15 and lots of proposals coming out of CLA, I'm also happy to not add this to the work of my office. But it strikes me there could be something really interesting that would be a little bit more college-wide in its focus.
And I think it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, I love that idea, Melinda. I'm very happy to work on that. I just wondered if there was any advice about doing this through a particular unit as opposed to college-wide. I'm not familiar, with the different configurations of Mellon funding, but this one looks like it's sort of uniquely suited to a small collective of faculty, either within a department or perhaps in a program, in an interdisciplinary program. So I am not sure what the college study would look like, and whether that would, sort of be through CLA associate deans or be done through a college thing. But I'm happy to be part of that planning group or discussion if anyone wants.
Well, it's interesting because they specifically mentioned deans as being possible PI.
Yeah, I was puzzled by that. And
Yeah.
I noticed that two of my colleagues from English, Kate and Megan, are here. I just emailed you to see. I didn't want to call you out. Hi. And I was delighted to see you here because I thought that the final item was totally written for our department. So I'm hoping that we could get something going through English, but I didn't want to speak for you either. So we could have that discussion outside of this room if it feels like too much pressure. So I was just wondering if you had anything that you particularly were thinking about.
So right now I'm teaching a course which is called Black Times, Afrofuturism, Afro-Pessimism, the Future Ends of the World. And the event and the class ends, so we read like Octavia Butler and people who have used Octavia Butler for facilitation, writing facilitation texts, and then use those texts for students to start, and we're just starting this right now, to develop an event. So right now they're in the stage of kind of narrowing that down using these principles and putting together proposals. And so part of it is trying to expand this. And actually one of the things is the time is not there for the one course. And the other part of it is, I think students don't have the energy necessary to when this is just one course. So part of what I'm thinking about is actually trying to make it something where it's 2 or more courses that students would enroll in at the same time and perhaps across multiple semesters. The other part of it too is trying to think about graduate school in light of a lack of jobs at this point, right? So what are we can keep training the same way where you write a dissertation and that's the end of it. But the other part that I'm thinking about is what does it mean to kind of think about this facilitation, which is coming directly from Afrofuturist work, and kind of thinking about what it means to be in a world that has, in some ways, we've seen the way that infrastructures fail us and how it's hard to kind of come together in ways when that doesn't exist anymore. So thinking about kind of trying to think through graduate students having stipends and fellowships and things like that to train them to do this work alongside students. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Megan, that sounds so good. my projects that I had on my mind coming into this, although I feel pretty flexible and happy to collaborate in other directions, is I wrote a Humanities Without Walls application in the fall for what was meant to be a creative writing summer incubator project for environmental writing. So the project was called the Watershed Workshops. And the idea was that we would combine students in creative writing programs with community members and have a very like in the field kind of writing experience at different sites around the Twin Cities, and be in conversation with researchers working on water equity justice issues around campus. I had thought I might build on that idea, but maybe emphasize more fully in this application the ways in which such an incubator would really need to have a decolonial perspective and ideally be in conversation with keepers of Indigenous scientific knowledge in order to really be fully engaged in this watershed. But I have questions about my own bandwidth right now, considering some other roles I have. And so would be really excited to throw my energy behind helping Megan figure out how to make that project go, like if there are ways creative writing can be of use or anything else in the department.
Well, I was sort of doing some brainstorming about, if we were to put together something through English, what would that look like? Who would participate? What would it do for us? And I love the idea of, well, two things. One, that it helps us rethink our entire curriculum and rebalance it. And I had thought of that idea of the larger idea of language, literature, language, speech as a form of action, right? And take us back to what we do. Like English departments have always had a stake in the oral tradition, in the speech act, right? The word as it happens, right? So there's so many things I think we could do with that. And I love the idea of an active language learning, writing lab, right? Sort of how do we do field work with that? I mean, I would love to have maybe a separate conversation about, could we put together some of these ideas in a larger rubric in a way that directly impacts our undergraduate and graduate curriculum? Because I have to say that's really heavy on my mind right now. Not just what we do as researchers and artists and writers, but how do we give that to our students, and how do we use it to take our students forward? So I do feel like, maybe we could get together something in time, and it would be in keeping. And I know it would be maybe in competition with other proposals that come forward. And I can't speak for who the selection process would be, but I will step out of that if I'm part of this space. But I'm happy to, Kate and Megan, if you want to work on this a little bit and we can just wordsmith something in time for the deadline, I'd love to do that with both of you.
And I would just say, related to both, Melinda, your proposal or pitch or whatever, and Joe, what you're saying, and everybody's individual ideas, that it strikes me that historically people have said that Mellon was not interested in things that had too many moving pieces. And actually, this is what always surprises me when I say that. When I look at what gets awarded, I'm sometimes surprised. I don't think something has to be flashy. I think that they are very interested in what they said about race and racialization, which is that they're interested in multiple axes examining these issues, so that, it literally could be the work that you're doing, Megan, along with historical perspectives and other sorts of things. But I also think that for all of the what I think is a hugely laudable term towards community engagement, they're really interested in how that impacts higher education and transformation in the institution itself. So looking at, college-wide, multiple departments, whatever, looking at how that can really be transformative in a long-term sense for higher education and humanities education. I think you all are identifying something that's really critical. And also they've been investing in career diversity work for a while. So they have been kind of ahead of the curve in terms of understanding that we as higher education institutions, we need to not just understand that our students will move into diverse careers, but how do we actually prepare them for diverse careers? And that's part of sort of public humanities as well. So I mean, I think all of the things you guys have touched upon are really kind of critically right up their alley. So.
They specifically note being interested in the role of colleges and universities within the civic engagement and voting rights topic area. They specifically call that out, but I would definitely expect that would be the case in all of these.
And that one would seem to align with the work that's already been on sort of civic engagement in public life that people in CLA are already involved with, but maybe deepening it in in terms of, and here's where I was thinking, Erin, about your sort of historical deeper background and things like that as potential. As best I read this, and I'll ask Juliet just to confirm this, when we can submit 3 proposals, I don't think that it has to be 1 in each category. I think it can be 3 in any one category or whatever. So I don't think that's any kind of.
Nowhere does it state that it has to be 1 in each area. I have seen that nowhere.
So. Well, thank you guys. And, let us know how we can help.
I think Alexandra had one other question.
Sorry, Alexandra.
Yeah, will we be able to, will this recording be on your website?
Yes.
On the same page as the other?
Yeah, it will be linked to it there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we will, I'm asking Abby behind the scenes, we'll limit it to UMN, right? Yes, partly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you have any concerns about ideas that you've expressed that you don't want to be public, let us know and we'll figure out how to finesse that. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.